Hi, this is Flor de Amelia, and welcome to Starting with IEP. I am very excited to be sharing that today we're going to be talking to Veronica for our episode 4. I am actually very proud that we are being consistent here. I do want to say, as a special needs mom, that I was really nervous and that I wasn't going to be able to be as consistent for you. I do want to say that my life is very chaotic, even though you see the smile on my face. Well, for those that are watching on YouTube, life is just difficult. On Monday, my daughter had her IEP. Well, it was the third one. We finally closed the IEP. But I want to say I was struggling emotionally there. I was really struggling, and I think it was mostly the fear of losing Aaliyah. Losing Aaliyah as in because her seizures are just difficult right now. We started a new anti-seizure med. We thought it was going to be great, and I think right now we're just working on dosages. So we always feel that we have these triumphs, right? I was getting so excited. I really thought that Xcorpri was going to be her medication because we went from 4 anti-seizures down to 2. And, that happened. So I want to say that editing this episode has been something that this is what I mean about being busy. I need to be busy. So thank you so much, Veronica, for giving me a reason to be busy to edit this video. I know you probably think I'm kind of odd because how can I go from being very emotional to very happy? And I want to say this is just my way of masking things, masking my emotions. I do want to end that the IP went really well. I want to say because the team was open in hearing Aaliyah's needs, and for me that was really important because right now Aaliyah, I want to describe her as minimally speaking, but there's so much in that head of hers. There's so much in her head. And I don't even know if on episode 1 I told you, and this is so meaningful to me. I know in every IEP I mentioned this, that Aaliyah told me, shut up, I want to lay on the couch. Wow. And consistently throughout the day, she prefers to just give me 1 or 2 words. But wow, when she said that, of course, I was like, Aaliyah. But behind that, I was like, Aaliyah. But that was the best day. It's the best day, you guys. The best day. So IEPs can get very emotional for me because Malia spends half her days, right, in school. So these IEPs in a way make them accountable, which I know the team is great. I know everyone that is in the field of special education working with our children. I know they mean well, but at the same time there's only so much they can do, especially like we don't know like the type of, there's different states, right? Every state is different. We don't know who is leading that, admin. We just don't know what we don't know, right? Especially if there's like a change in who is leading those chairs. The mindset, the funding or the lack of funding, those are something that we always have to be very cautious about. So for me, this project just helps me empower more parents, help me make sure that I'm helping these other children that, they need someone to help them speak up for themselves. Right now, I often tell people that, yes, currently Leah is minimally speaking, but I have no doubt that soon, hopefully very soon, but eventually she definitely will speak her own mind and she will tell me like, nope, mom, you did your job. Go back to doing whatever you were doing, but I got this. So that's my hope for her, that she can tell me. Oh, she definitely tells me through her gestural expressions. So again, thank you, Veronica, for giving me a reason to be very focused on something else other than, dwelling on things I cannot control, like my daughter's seizures. So this passion project of mine, starting with IEP, means so much to me because we get to help out. We, as in me and Aaliyah, and everyone else that we are interviewing, we get to help out other families. So very meaningful. Okay, so I'm going to actually do something a little bit different because I realize that a lot of you have questions. You guys send me private messages. Thank you so much for those. And you guys want to check out whoever I interviewed, their Instagram. So I thought I can share a little bit. So let me see if I can share the screen real quick. 1 second. Okay, so I'll share this really quickly because I know some of you guys are listening on Spotify and not on YouTube. But for those that are listening through YouTube, check this out. Oh my goodness. So her Instagram is growth education therapy. Well, growth.education.therapy. And this is what I was telling you, it was like doom scrolling. And wow, one of them I already highlighted some. So I love this carousel where it says like structured literacy, 6 pillars of instruction. And then she goes on and she gives really cute visuals too about phonology, sound symbol association, syllables, morphology, syntax, semantics. That is great. And then another one, oh my goodness. I love scaffolding. This is really cute. It kind of breaks it down. I love the videos that she does when it comes to this. Oh, and then this is the reading intervention training that she was talking about, but I believe she said that it's recorded and then you guys can watch it. But please, over here, you can send a comment to her. You can send her a private message as well. Check this out. She has really good resources in here. Please, again, her Instagram is growth.education.therapy. Please check her out. Okay, let's go back. Now that I showed you a little bit of their Instagram, I really hope you guys can follow them. My goodness, really good content. Like, I think also, I don't know if I shared you guys, but this is how I find them. I go through, I know I doom scroll, but I do check them. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is great. This is great. This is great. Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm so glad that I like shared a little bit of that. But for today's guest, we have Veronica, and she is a former special education teacher. She's a reading interventionist and an advocate. So, one of the things that Veronica is going to be sharing in today's episode is her journey from classroom teaching to building her own educational platform, which, again, I have to stress out. Please check out her Instagram. And also, she shares the gaps that she noticed in when she was doing her own teacher training, especially around dyslexia and executive functioning. Also, she's going to be sharing resources and strategies that empower both the educators and parents. So this episode is definitely for you if you're a parent navigating in the IEPs, if you're an educator looking for practical tools, and also if you're a provider that just wants to help their student a little bit more, or the participant. And also if you want some encouragement or insight in supporting kids with learning differences. I think the more that you know, the more that you empower yourself. I also looked at it, what if I saw this 10 years ago? This episode would have helped me by acknowledging, or when I see a teacher struggling, I would be like, did you contact this department? Did you have this training? Because a lot of the times I didn't know what I didn't know. But now that, Veronica is telling us the different types of trainings that they can have, this is something that you can ask. Did the teacher have X, Y, and Z in their training? And it also does depend different, like within different states. But I think it's a good practice to have, because it's something that I kind of learned when I became a teacher, and then I saw the lack of training that was given once, and then I knew what I needed to get done after the fact. But it's not something that they kind of teach you before while you're getting your licensure for teaching. So I really do hope that this helps also parents and educators, so that way they know what they know. This would also help me if I was like going into becoming a teacher, and it would have helped me like, oh, definitely training, ask them before my start date. So, okay, well, stay tuned for the episode. So, hi Veronica, how are you today?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for coming here today. I'm really excited to get my questions started. So I was just wondering if you can please start us off with giving us information about your personal life, or something that you can get us to know you a little bit better.
Sure. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and some things that I enjoy doing outside of my work is I love being in nature. So I love to go hiking and walk my dog. I am really into traveling. Last year, I went to Belize with some of my girlfriends. And then this year, we're going to an area outside of Santa Fe, kind of like a nature-centered activities where we're going to hike and just kind of relax. And so, yeah, I love traveling. I love being with friends. I have a dog who is over there. I can see him. You guys can't. And I also love reading and knitting. So that's the things that I like to do personally. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
No, thank you so much. I love that you have that nice balance, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. Like to be well-rounded with my hobbies.
Yes. I tried knitting. It didn't go well for me.
It's
I got
hard. I tried it at first, like I tried it many years ago, and then yeah, I put it down. And then I went to, because it was confusing and frustrating. But then I went to like a yarn, kind of an independent yarn store, and the owner was really, really sweet and printed out like a beginner friendly knitting pattern and like wrote notes on it for things like the mistakes I told her I kept making. So that's the way I really learned how to knit, was she really guided me. The first time I tried, it was way too hard. Like I had chosen something that was beyond what a beginner could do.
Oh no, thank you for that advice. Actually, I do know a few places that I can go and just kind of ask them. I bought this little like device. It's like a plastic circle, and then you're supposed
Yeah.
to go around it, and there's like different shapes, and I'm still even stuck with those. So, no, but thanks for that. And then my next question is, can you please tell me your why? Like, thank you so much for putting yourself out there. I love your platform. If you can please share about that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I actually started my Instagram when I was still teaching. So I was a special education teacher for 10 years. And I knew kind of around year 7 that I wanted to start to work for myself, still in education and still doing something similar, but I just wanted some autonomy in what I was able to focus on with my students, and I wanted a little bit more independence around my schedule. And I felt like I wanted to kind of be in more control with career related stuff. And so I but I also wanted to stay in my current position for 10 years, because then I would be vested for my state for like retirement pension. So it was kind of a way, when I started the Instagram, it was a way to kind of focus on building my business, kind of like a passion project, where I was like, I'm really excited about this, but I also don't want to rush and become not eligible for my pension. So it was kind of like a way for me to keep working on what I really wanted to do. And then it also hopefully would raise like awareness and help me transition when it was when it was a good time for me to step away from the classroom. So yeah, it was kind of like a passion project where I was like, I'm really into spreading specific. At that time, I was posting a lot about executive functioning, and that was something. It still is, though. I would say I post a little bit more about reading now, but I wanted to also share information about executive functioning. I really enjoyed talking about it, and it wasn't something at the time, at least, that was as big of a focus in the classroom. So it didn't feel like there was a space to really talk about it where I was. Does that make sense? I know it was a lot of information.
Yes. So I don't know if I told you I was also a classroom teacher. And I remember there was a position that was opening up for being a reading teacher. And I was like, that's a lot of responsibility because you guys did not give me training on this. So can you please tell me about your education and how you got all that training? And I think I saw a post saying something about the lack of training, right, for like teachers.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
please tell us about
definitely.
that.
So I did come into education through, I guess you might call it a non-traditional pathway. I did Teach for America. And so my undergraduate degree is in social work. And then I was interested after that in pursuing, not as, I mean, teaching, yes, but also I just wanted to be in like a community service oriented space. And so I found out about Teach for America. And then the more I learned, I felt like I wanted to apply. And so I did. And then they asked if I would be willing to teach special education. And I said yes. And part of that involved, I had two choices between a certificate program or a master's. And so I opted for an MED, or a master's in education in behavioral and learning disabilities. And so I completed that program for the first 2 years while I was teaching. And there was actually a reading endorsement with it. At that time, there wasn't as much in my state about dyslexia specific training. I would say that there was definitely a gap in knowledge. I do think that's changed in the last few years. But at the time that I was doing my program, I only had like one course in phonics. I had a lot of other courses in reading in general, but we really didn't touch that much on dyslexia specific challenges and approaches that are successful to work with students who have dyslexia. And so transparently, as I knew I was transitioning to my own practice, I did do some research about ways to work privately in education. And one thing that kept coming up was working with students with dyslexia and tutoring with them. But I didn't have any training at that point. And I was also not aware that in reality, many of the students who I taught actually had dyslexia. And as I learned more, I was like, oh, okay, so this is like not something that just happens in one-on-one tutoring. The students who I'm working with who have IEPs, they most likely have characteristics, or some of them probably had diagnoses of dyslexia. And just the way the school system works, we don't like focus on that term and the training around it. And so originally I was interested in getting more training because I knew I was building my business and I needed to have that experience. But then also it was super helpful when I was working with students still in the classroom. I was like, wow, this is what I needed all along. But yeah, so I would say there wasn't a lot of training when I was in teaching in I left in 2023. And around that same time in my state, a law was passed requiring
What
screening.
state?
I'm in Georgia. Yes. And so thanks to some parental advocacy, around that same time I left in 2023, there's a law passed that required all students like K through 3 to be screened. And I think there were some other provisions. I'm not as familiar as I should be with the law, but I do know that kind of shifted some things a bit. And so I do think that teachers now are getting more training, but at the time I hadn't been. So I did search around in my district, and one of the districts I was in, they did offer something called a Wilson reading, like the reading training for teachers. But where I was, it wasn't like available to everyone. It was maybe if I apply, I'll be able to do it, or maybe the next year. So I kind of took it upon myself, and I created a Donors Choose, which is a platform where teachers can basically fundraise for supplies for their classroom or training. And so I fundraised before I did the Orton-Gillingham Donors Choose, I actually did one for yoga for students with ADHD and autism. Because I also have a adult certification for yoga. So I'm also a trained yoga teacher, but I wanted to learn more about how to support students through yoga. And so I did that training first, funded through Donors Choose. And then since that went really well, and I was able to start using the skills that I got right away in the classroom with students. So I decided to do another one, and I did a Donors Choose for an approach called Orton-Gillingham. And so that's not the only approach or methodology to work with students with dyslexia, but it is a pretty highly regarded one. And it was certainly the one that I learned about first. And so I did a Donors Choose, which basically you explain why your project is needed, what it will entail. For me, it was like a week-long training. And then you share it you share like the Donors Choose webpage amongst your colleagues, your friends, anyone. Sometimes they have matching days. And so like Mark Zuckerberg's wife like matched donations on a certain day. And so I was able to get the Orton-Gillingham training funded. And that was the first one. And
can I ask, are parents also able to get this type of training?
That is a good question. And I don't know that. I do know parents sometimes ask about that in Facebook groups I'm in, and I am not 100% positive about that. I do know that they can get trained in something called Barton. And so I don't know as much about Barton. I will also say like, I prefer doing the Orton-Gillingham pathway because it is an approach. So sometimes curriculums like Barton or Wilson, they're great, but they are kind of a box curriculum. And so they don't take into account every child's cognitive profile or like certain processing areas. And so not to get too this might be like too specific, but like Barton has a cutoff for like children they recommend working with must have an IQ of 85. And so, for example, some students who I work with don't. Theirs is maybe a little lower than that. And that's often because they have a processing area that is maybe significantly more challenged than maybe another student. And so you really want to make sure when you're planning lessons including those for reading, that if you have a student who has specific processing needs, like I'm planning for that in my session so that whatever I'm doing is accessible to them. And so I feel like I got a better understanding on how to do that when I actually did my second Orton-Gillingham training. So I did my first week one that I got funded myself, and that was a classroom educator training. And so I worked with a group of teachers who I didn't know, like we were on Zoom, and that lasted about a week. And then I was teaching in a resource room in middle school. And so that just means a smaller group of students and working directly with them. And I did that for about a year. And then the district I was employed with, they had an opportunity for more in-depth training for Orton-Gillingham, and I applied to that. And I was very fortunate in that I was selected because that was a year-long practicum. And so I trained directly with someone called a teaching fellow through the Orton-Gillingham Academy. And then I did 100 tutoring hours, and I had some video recording done, like with the student, and then I would get feedback from the teaching fellow, and that was incredibly helpful. That I am not sure if parents can do without like a teaching background, because it is just a little bit more in depth that you might be able to. I'm not 100% sure.
But I think they can get the training. For me as a parent, I just want the training. I don't need the certificate.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
True.
Like, I just want to know so I can give all that training for my child.
Yeah.
So I was just...
Yeah, and there are people who do parent-specific training too. That is something I would like to do in the future, is work with parents and just be like, oh, actually, you know what? There's another person who I don't know personally, but I do know through social media, and she has like a training cohort for parents where she's just like, if you're interested in working with your child and helping them read, like I will teach you how to do that. And I'll send that to you, because she also has the Orton-Gillingham training. So she basically shows parents like how to work with their students. So I'll send that for the podcast notes if you're interested.
Yes. But are you thinking about doing that? Maybe sometime?
I was. I can't do all the things all at once. So I was interested in that last year, but I realized, and this is not to say that people without children can't help parents, but I don't have children myself, and then I kind of realized like I was a bit more interested in supporting teachers directly and helping them, and so that's kind of where my focus is. And I just realized like I can't do everything all at once.
Yes, I think it would be like the situation that I was put under. They asked me, I want to say weeks before the school started, because they just lost their reading teacher, and I was like shocked because I feel like the kids deserve better. And I was like, where's my training? Like, where do I get the training? Oh, it won't be available until like the spring. And I'm like, so the kids are gonna go. I was like, no, you guys need to find someone better, because I was more of the science teacher because of my microbiology background. So yes, I do feel that they definitely need you to be there and help support the teachers. So can you tell me something that at your work, what do you highlight? Like, what's most memorable to you in a positive way? And then like something that you learned from work that you may hope that they're working a little bit more at?
Sure, of course. There's so many positive things. I mean, I love working with children and teenagers and seeing their growth, seeing them become more confident on learning to read is, it's a critical life skill. And so being able to be a part of that is so special. And also supporting parents is really a special process too. So many parents are intimidated and they find themselves overwhelmed. They might have had unfortunate experiences in the past. And so being able to be a partner with them and, support them is really important too. I'm trying to think of one specific moment. And there's a lot. This has nothing to do with reading, but I took a group of students, like 10 of us, got an opportunity to partner with the Children's Forest Service here in Georgia, and we got a chance to go on a guided hike and stay at a place called the Hike-In here, which is in a national, either a state forest or a national forest. And so we hiked 5 miles, and then we got to stay at this very sustainable kind of like a nature inn, again, called the Hike Inn. There were 2 guides from the Children's Forestry Service who like led us through the woods and showed the kids like a lot with, I think we did some water testing as we went, and that was just really special. One student, that was like their first hike, and so that has nothing to do with reading, but that was a really special time. Like it was myself.
You bonding with your students.
Yeah. And I love nature too. So being able to guide them through that was really special. So that was a highlight for me. That was really fun. And then something I hope they're working on is, special education training around things like dyslexia and ADHD. There's so many, if you are working with resource or a smaller group, but still working with the same curriculum, and especially if you're in your co-taught classes, like you are working with a lot of students who have dyslexia and ADHD. But in my experience, there wasn't that much specific training on those 2 kind of areas for student need. And so I hope that's changing. I feel like special ed teachers are really spread thin. They do have to go to a lot of mandatory training on things like curriculum and the standards that the same general education staff has to go to. And not to say they shouldn't, but there's just not, again, back to what I said, you can't do everything all at once. And to me, I think really supporting teachers with the populations that they serve, like that to me is their role and their specialty. And so I think that training should be prioritized for that.
So can you give the teachers that were in my shoes, for examples, like they asked to be the the reading teacher, what would you tell them? Okay, well, give them a checklist, like what types of trainings or what to look out for.
A brief summary is really leverage the support in your district. Sometimes there are trainings that are available, but they're not going to go out and be like, hey, we want you to do this. You kind of have to find out where the opportunities are by finding out who is in the literacy department. If you're in a larger district, making sure that you're asking them, hey, I am interested in training to work with students with dyslexia or ADHD. Are there any trainings available in the district? And then sometimes there might be curriculum available at your school, but like you haven't set it up yet and you need help doing that. And so finding the person who can help you with that is important. So like the technology department, for example, at the last school I worked at, I had a program called Read 180, which isn't like a perfect program, but it was available to me, but I didn't know how to set it up. And our technology person was new. And so they were also getting their footing. So I had to go to them like 2 or 3 times. And I was like, I really want to start using this. I want to start using this. And then finally, when they were at a space where they could help me, they did get me set up, and they even had an HMH coach come to the school just for me. And like she said,
H&M-H?
It's a curriculum. So it's like a curriculum company, Mifflin.
Oh,
yeah. And so somebody came out just for me and like helped set up the technology for me. So they had their individualized diagnostics, or they had a diagnostic the students would take, and then that could populate individual lessons. They set up like a library for me. And so, but I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't keep asking. So you kind of do have to ask for the training. And then I would also just say that, and this is what we're covering in the training I'm hosting, is there are a lot of free resources out there but you just kind of have to know about them. Like for lower rope skills, like being able to sound out words and recognize words, there's a great program called UFly. I don't know how to say it actually, UFLI, from the Florida Literacy. It's like a university in Florida. And so they have all of these free resources, and parents can use these too for working with students and helping them basically learn phonics, for lack of a better term. And that's all free. Like, so finding materials is a lot that we're going to cover in the training. So there's free resources out there. There's probably training. You kind of have to, the biggest thing I would say is like, you have to do the asking. Like you can't wait to be asked, because like they'll forget about you. Like, especially as a reading, if you're a reading intervention teacher, you are kind of your own department. ELA teachers, they do go to content meetings and things like that. But if you're doing reading intervention or special education, ELA like resource, I would be proactive in finding resources. I am hosting a live Q&A. The training is available for download after that. So yes.
That's so great. Well, thank you. Can I ask you about my next series of questions about IEP?
Sure, yes, and I'm realizing I'm so sorry. I need to grab my computer charger so
Oh, yeah.
I don't run out. So I'll be right back.
Okay.
We can definitely move into the IEP questions. Can you hear me still
Oh, yeah.
okay?
Yeah. It's so great. Yep. Okay, so on to the IEP questions. What preparation happened behind the scenes of the school's teams and as an IEP meeting approaches?
Sure. So ideally, the case manager, or who is also a special education teacher, is collecting IEP goal data, which should be happening not just right before a meeting, but being able to have data to analyze, to assess and know kind of what IEP goals to include. So if students have goals that they've mastered, taking them out of their IEP, or if they have new needs, putting them, creating a goal based on that. So data collection is a really big one. And also getting feedback from general education teachers, learning how the student's doing in class. Again, all of this is to identify what the strengths and needs are. So that's a big part of it. So being able to speak on what the student is doing well in and what they might still need support. Sometimes, especially as students are getting older and they have something called a transition plan, the case manager is also interviewing the student to find out what their career interests are, what they are interested, if they're interested in attending college. And that even starts in middle school. So that type of interview with the student, that's also part of it. They're also behind the scenes, the case manager is also working to send invites out to the parents to make sure that the parent can attend, and also find a general education teacher that is available to attend the meeting too. So I would say those are the biggest things: is data collection and scheduling, making sure that they have who they need for the meeting. I would say those are the main things. Unofficially, if there are things that the case manager wants to run by maybe their supervisor, if they have questions or concerns, that might be happening too. And then drafting the first sections of the IEP, not too much where it gets to something called pre,
Mhm.
but drafting the present levels. So again, the present levels are just highlighting what the student's strengths and weaknesses are based on data. And then also drafting, and it has been a few years since I've written IEPs, but like drafting, I think the goals may be one thing that you can draft ahead of the meeting. You don't want to draft the services, so the types of classes, because that's based on like team discussion. And so you don't want that drafted ahead of time. And then parents are brought in and just basically told what's going to happen. Parents are part of the IEP team. So that should be based on a team discussion.
Can I ask about what type of documentation, or as a parent, sorry if I'm always asking about the parent
That's
side, because I feel like this would be a good opportunity to kind of give the parents some awareness. If you were my teacher, what type of, so I can understand what you're saying about my child, what type of documents can I ask as a parent? Can I ask like the baseline, or how they have been progressing, like with reading 180 or that
Yeah,
program?
you can definitely ask. I am not as informed with the specific laws around like what is allowed to be given and not. I have another resource for that. Her name is Brandy, and she is like a membership for parents who, it has the name IEP in the title. I'll send it to you there, but like parents can join for not a lot of, it's not expensive. I think it's like a monthly fee, and they can ask those more specific questions. I do think that it is okay for parents to ask to see like work samples and things like that. I would think they may have to fill out a record request, but there's usually a process with that where they just fill out a type of form with the school, and then they should be able to see like most things, I would think, on, and certainly at the very least like the data summary, so like charts and graphs and things like that, that is readily available, or it should be. And then to see like work samples, I there might be a form that parents would need to fill out called like a record request, but it is something that is typically done. Just organization wise, it might be something the parent wants to request ahead of time. So like if there is a form to fill out, I would recommend like doing that ahead of the meeting, because just getting everything organized and available for parents is sometimes a process because it might be filed in another classroom or it might be confusing to find. So asking ahead of time was probably the best.
Oh, yes, thank you. And this actually goes to my next question. If you can tell me what is a typical day for teachers, and also tell me more about your workload so parents can understand what the school side of things is,
Yeah,
what they're going through.
yes, definitely. And I will say I've learned because I'm in Facebook groups with other special education teachers, there is a bit of variability. So like things are different within certain schools. Like I've noticed that certain teachers who post from Texas, like sometimes the way they format is a little bit different. Like sometimes only one teacher does the IEPs and they're writing IEPs all day. And so they don't teach it all. That was not my experience. My experience was I often, it's IEP season, which is usually in spring because that's when mini IEPs are
Mhm.
due. For me, I would teach usually like 4 classes a day, and then I would hold IEP meetings during my planning with the general education teacher. So during like if I got to school, I was one who kind of wanted things. Actually, that's not true. I sometimes I would get to school and I would kind of get everything together that day as I got more comfortable doing that. But I would get to school, kind of prep some items, and then I would teach 4 classes. When I taught elementary, they were often like 4 different classes. So like maybe co-taught math, small group reading, small group math, and I even taught like a social emotional group. When I was in middle school, I actually just taught the most recent time in middle school. I taught the same subject just like 4 times a day, which was resource
Mhm.
reading. But again, holding IEP meetings during planning and working with general education teachers during that time. So that's like what a day would look like, if that makes sense.
Very busy.
Very busy, yes. And
Very
then
busy.
the last year, I was also an LEA or a local educational agency representative. So I was basically supervising other teachers' meetings. And so it was pretty common for me to have like a meeting every day during my planning time during the week. So that was a bit taxing. Yes. Yeah. Very busy. Yes, definitely.
Now parents can understand why. Sometimes in the IP meeting, it's not the parents, it's just the workload is just overwhelming. And then what are some common challenges that you and your colleagues face when implementing IEPs or collaborating with families?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely think the biggest challenge is staffing. Like to your point, they ask you to be a reading teacher and like you didn't have that training, but like they
Mhm.
might not have had a lot of other options. And so it that has nothing to do with I mean, I do think that could be corrected by providing more training and having that more accessible, but it staffing is something that is beyond what I taught, like my understanding of it. But I do know it definitely impacts being able to implement the IEP because you might only have teachers who are available to you who don't have any special education background. Sometimes you might have just a rotating sub, unfortunately, I have seen. And then that can impact other things like you might have co-teachers who are meant to deliver co-taught services being pulled to cover other classes. So I would say that that's like the most dire thing that's kind of impacting the IEP delivery. Yes.
Yes, I think the reason why they asked me is because so I'm a behavior analyst and they knew I had the behavior down packed. So they were like, you can get the
Yeah.
kids, like the kids
I
love
see that.
it, you
I
know how
can
to
see that.
motivate
Yeah. And that's from like an admin perspective. It's like that's kind
admin.
of the hierarchy of needs is like, can your teacher handle the class of students
For
so that
behavior
things remain
management.
safe? Yeah. And that is also, I mean, that is a big thing. Like generally getting the teachers the training they need to be able to support both behavior and reading. And since you mentioned that, the training that I'm hosting that I mentioned earlier, I actually partnered with BCBA, and she's going to be hosting a
Yes.
training video. Like it's 3 training videos, and the third one is like proactive strategies for teachers to use, and then like prompting and reinforcement. So yeah, so I intentionally brought her on because I was like, this is not just like how to teach reading. You have to also know how to support students with their behavior.
You also did a post about like I think you were seeing one of your kiddos in camp, and then I love your advice about how to slowly get them in. So that was so great. I was like, oh my goodness, her
I'm
mind is
glad
so
that you
good.
like that. Thank you for the feedback. Thank
No,
you.
that was great. I was like, I really hope more not just providers, but also parents, because the parents can also tell them like, hey, you need to check her out and
Yeah.
get her advice.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. So my fourth question is regarding IEPs is from the school's perspective, what is one crucial insight about IEP discussions that can significantly enhance parent-school collaboration?
It's hard to narrow down because, again, I've worked with so many families. So, yes, so the parents are a required member of the IEP team. And so parents sometimes are hesitant to, I find either parents are sometimes hesitant to step into that role and request certain things or advocate. It can feel scary. It can feel like they're pushing back and maybe even being disrespectful towards the school. But I do think it's super important to get their input and for them to feel confident and comfortable like asking questions. And then on the flip side, let me know if I'm going off and we're on a different question. But the flip side of that is when I do see parents who are comfortable asking questions and advocating, for them to also have some understanding of how like IEPs work versus like a diagnosis like dyslexia or ADHD. There's kind of a gap of knowledge there. Eligibility for IEPs is not based on the diagnosis. It's actually based on how that issue might be impacting their education. And so you really, if a parent comes in and is like, my student has dyslexia, they need help, like that by itself is not enough for them to qualify for services. It has to be more like, hey, I have noticed my student has gotten in like the 13th percentile for MAP, like 3 different years, and they're struggling in these different areas. So I'm requesting an IEP meeting. I'm requesting us to evaluate my student for special education services. I know that sounds really technical, but like that is the language of the school. And I do have some posts on that about how to advocate for that, because again, just based on the law, like that's how schools like respond, and the steps that they take is based on like that type of process.
Thank you for bringing that part up, but can I ask you like a little bit more about that? So I have parents that have done what you just mentioned. So let's say they're in that phase and they need like an outsource, like an outside provider.
Yeah.
How can they get a diagnosis from an outside provider, or what are the steps that they can take?
So they're like an outside evaluation. Is that what you're talking about? So, and I admit Brandy would be a better person to speak on this, but I do know that parents can have independent educational evaluations paid for actually by the school system. If the steps to get there, I'm unfortunately not completely sure. I would imagine that it would involve requesting that at an IEP meeting in writing, because that's what everything involves. And then having data to back it up. Again, it all comes down to like, if you feel like there is an outside evaluation needed, an outside provider needed, you have to back it up with data related to the school. So like if something is happening, like for example, a BCBA, some data that I would encourage the parents to look for would be like, is the school calling you multiple times about behavior challenges? Have you had to pick your child up from school early? What are the types of challenges? Like, are they being documented on, like, is it discipline referrals? Are they actually being documented, or is it just like teachers or admin like calling and being like, we have this issue? Like, you kind of need to have that paper trail to be able to then justify we need an outside evaluator to come in. That's a rough answer to your question. Brandy, you should reach out to Brandy to be on your podcast. She would have a lot to say on that.
Yes, thank you. I think it's really good for them, for parents, and then also for providers, because providers and teachers also like listening. And because I know there's so many teachers that they're like, they can't really go against what their admin is saying. So sometimes it would be nice for the teachers to give parents some resources because their hands are tied.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It starts with the parent, and I can get very uncomfortable for teachers if they are pushing for things and there's pushback. It's unfortunate, and there are ways to go around that. Like many districts actually have, again, I don't know if you're talking about BCBAs, but many districts do have behavior specialists, and teachers can actually submit paperwork and kind of request one to come out and observe and even start working with students. But teachers do, again, have to know where to look. So that comes back to what I said earlier. I have actually worked with behavior specialists in multiple districts, but it was a process to get them to come out. It wasn't just like, hey, I need help. And admin usually, it's not, I guess sometimes they might not want to have them come out, but usually admin just doesn't know. Like it might be in the county, and teachers might have to fill out paperwork on this random website somewhere, and then they might be able to get additional support. But it's, again, you kind of have to hunt for it.
Yeah, no, I was going more for reading because for some
Oh,
reason it's like they're okay with where their current status is. They might see a little bit of a progress, but they were like, my child has been able to do that for the past 3 years. And you guys are now just realizing it like 3 years later. So that's why I was like, what if the parents are trying, but they still can't get more support?
yeah, and there are things like there's dispute resolution processes that exist county by county. Like I know in Georgia, there's usually like paperwork that you might fill out on the local school or county's website, or even on the Georgia Department of Ed, where if you don't agree with, first you have to actually ask your request in writing at like an IEP meeting. You have to make sure whatever you as the parent are requesting is like well documented, because schools are more willing to kind of uh, go along with a request if like it's clear and documented. If it's just a verbal request, it's kind of like it doesn't really exist. But if you've done a written request and it's in the IEP and the school still says no, they have to do something called prior written determination. So they have to, in writing, explain why they're not honoring your request. And then as the parent, you have dispute resolution options. Like you can file for mediation, where a third party comes in and basically has like a mediated meeting between you and the school to see if you can get your issues resolved. And then there's also a step past that. That's I can't remember the name of it, but basically you go to an IEP, almost like a court hearing. So yeah, there are dispute resolution guidelines for parents.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my last question. So, what are some practical ways that parents can support the school team in helping their child thrive, especially with academic goals like reading?
Yeah. Again, I don't know if it's practical, but I feel like a lot comes down to supporting teachers and getting them the right type of training. And, also there might be training within the school or district that parents have to specifically ask for. But I think if more teachers have resources and knowledge to support students with dyslexia, I think that benefits everyone. I don't think one person has to hold that knowledge. So I would say the most important way that I think to support school teams is actually advocating for better training for school and staff. And that's sometimes doesn't even involve like working with local admin. Like I mentioned a few years ago, there was a bill that passed that required training. I think it also required training, but like screening for students with dyslexia in K-3. And that was really, from my understanding, the result of a lot of parental advocacy at the state level. So that sometimes that is like the most important thing, is going beyond the problems that are in front of you and really looking to see like, where is the source of this challenge coming from, and what can I do in my role to bring awareness for that, if that makes sense.
Advocacy. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. I have like 20 plus questions more, but maybe if you're okay, if I can please have you again.
Yeah, I'd love to come back.
There was this one post that you had that I was like, I wish I would have seen this sooner. Like when my daughter she's currently 16, but there was this one post, I think it was a carousel, and you were talking about like fluency, decoding. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I think so, yeah.
It broke it down, because I think a lot of families, what they don't understand is it's not just reading. There's like different parts of reading.
Yes,
so
yes, definitely. And so that is something that we'll cover in the training that I'm hosting, is finding diagnostics. So that was something I didn't answer with my question, but really doing a diagnostic to know what the challenges are, because that makes the instruction more targeted and usually more successful. So yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be on here. And I love your posts too. I've shared some of them on, I can't remember which one I shared recently, but I also appreciate yours as well.
Thank you. If you want to share anything, so we can put you, like, I'm going to put it on the web, and then in the website, it's going to have your resources. If there's one in particular that you want to share, because that way they can know more about your
reading training. I'd love to post that. And the reading training is also like, parents can take it too. And I think it would benefit them if they're working directly with their students. So that is at my website, which is it's 3 words, but all together, no punctuation between them. Growth Education Therapy, growth, GROWTH, growtheducationtherapy.com/reading intervention, all one word. And that's where my people can sign up for the training.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much. Thank
All right.
you. Have a
Have a
great
great
day.
day.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us in this powerful conversation with Veronica. I hope that her story has inspired you in the way that it has inspired me, reminding us that with the right tools, training, and advocacy, every child can be supported to reach their potential. Now, if you'd like to learn more about Veronica's work, you can find her resource and upcoming reading intervention training at growtheducationtherapy.com/reading intervention. I'll also include a link in today's show's notes. Please don't forget to subscribe to Starting with IEP wherever you listen to your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. And if today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with another parent, teacher, or advocate who could use this encouragement. I'm Flor de Amelia, and this is Starting with IEP. Together, let's keep showing up strong for our kids. Start with the IEP and go from there.